backyard, lakini I hope tutakuwa tunaongea na yeye in a few. But right about now mtu wangu, wacha tu welcome ama tukaribisha kila mtu mwenye ako tuning. Kama uko Kejani, kama uko na mbogi yako mtu wangu uko Bezu na stream live, asanteni tu sana. Wenye wanatuongelesha upande wa Twitter, Facebook na Instagram, akina Meja Ngure, akina Mavenge na wachekinyi wote, asanteni tu sana. Thank you so much. But pia imefika ni ile idhaa mtu wangu, nilikuwa nimewaambia leo tuko na guest kwenye studio na atakuwa na tujoin live, but he's not here live, but tutakuwa naye pale kwenye screens mtu wangu, mtakuwa mnamcheki. Na he's a CEO of Honest Music, yeye ni producer, yeye ni artist, he's a singer. So ni majina zote, ni majina kubwa mingi zenye ziko pale. Anajiita Christos DC na ametujoin sahi akiwa upande wa Washington DC. So hi Christos.
Greetings, bless.
Wagwan, how are you doing?
Everything's good. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome, and thank you for gracing our show.
Give thanks.
Tell us about your name first, Christos DC.
Well, Christos was a nickname that was given to me by my grandmother. My family had come from a place in Greece called Sparta in the 1920s. And so she would always give me Greek names growing up. My name is Christopher, but she would always say Christo or Christos. And so as I was doing my first album, I was trying to decide what to call myself. And I had a dream where I saw a lot of children coming out of a school, and they looked at me and said, "Oh, you're this guy Christos." So I decided to do my first two albums under the name Christos. But then I added the DC because with everything online, it's very easy to get lost in the mix. And so I needed something more to identify myself than just the name Christos. And I'm born and raised in Washington, DC, so it just seemed a natural fit.
Oh, awesome. So speaking about your grandmother, why don't you tell us something about your background in reggae music and like how you got to reggae music?
Oh, reggae music for me was something I discovered very young. I was maybe 10, 11 years old, and it wasn't the most popular music amongst kids I knew growing up. They were listening more to rock and roll and disco and things like this. And when I discovered reggae, I just felt something really special and a real connection with it. So I just started collecting it and making mixtapes as a teenager. And then that grew into selling mixtapes. And that was how I began to meet the Rastafarian community in Washington, DC, who would help me to sell my tapes. And this eventually led to me meeting artists and musicians that were coming from Jamaica through Washington. And that led to my, as a young man, playing guitar with some bands out of Jamaica. And that was my start.
Oh, awesome. And what about your family? What about your parents? Is it something that they introduced you to, like the music industry? Is it something they introduced you to? Because it says that, you can tell us that your family or your father and mother, they were teachers, professional teachers.
Yeah, my parents are both very well-established opera singers, and they were both teachers. And, you know, as I was young, my father was always touring on the road as an opera singer and, you know, recording with the London Philharmonic Orchestra and Capitol Records. And my mother, meanwhile, was the president of the National Opera Association. And so she was doing workshops all over the world. And I grew up in a house where I would come home from school and you would hear people singing. Oh! So you could hear this up the block. And so that was that was my upbringing. I grew up around music, and they had my brother and I both study musical instruments from when we were very young. And so I grew up around music.
Okay, so is it just you who's an artist in the house? I mean, is it just you and your folks who are artists in the house, or your brother as well?
Well, my brother is no longer with us. My brother was taken from us when I was very young. By the age of 18, 19 years old, my brother was killed in a very tragic event.
Sorry about that.
Which was actually something, because my last conversation with my brother, he was telling me how he was singing on the streets of London every day, and he would get very large crowds around him, and he was making 200, 300 pounds an hour on the street. And so this was my very last conversation with him. And after he passed, I decided that I would pursue doing something I love with my life, and gave up my business at the time, where I had a landscaping business and was doing well financially. And I went back to school to study music again.
Oh wow. Okay. And sorry about your brother, bro. May he rest in peace.
Thank you. Thanks. Give
Sorry
thanks.
about that. So you're in Washington DC, right?
Born and raised in Washington. I now live just 5 minutes away. I'll be going to Washington once we finish speaking here today.
Wow. So tell us about the reggae scene in Washington. How is it like?
You know, growing up, I have to say the reggae scene in Washington, D.C. was phenomenal. This was back in the 1980s, then into the 1990s as I started playing music. It's changed a lot.
Okay.
But there is still a reggae community here. There is still a reggae scene here. But I have to say it's quite different than what it once was. There's less venues. And I have to say, it seems to be, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying this, but there's less support than it felt like there was maybe 30 years ago. You know, a lot of the community has left outside of Washington. It's a very transitory city, so they're always moving new people in, and other people go out. So this has caused me to look elsewhere and to do music in other parts of the world. But I still love Washington. There's people here, groups here, musicians who are phenomenal, who are still keeping, you know, the music alive and well. We just need more venues and more places that can pay us what we deserve.
Nice, nice. And speaking of you leaving Washington, D.C. to go and venture into music in other parts of the world, have you been to Jamaica?
Oh, many, many times. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I started working with groups from Jamaica back in the early 1990s. And I've worked in Jamaica in the studios there many, many times. And really toured the world with artists and musicians from Jamaica. So, you know, I spent so much time in Jamaica over the years that I've adapted it, you know, many things from the culture and from my experiences amongst the people.
Okay. What about the language? What about patois?
Well, patois, you know, say patois a real thing. And people them know say you can't talk a patois even if you not come from yard. You can't talk it. I don't use it very frequently, but when I go to Jamaica, I will sometimes speak in patois to people when they don't understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
And so they say, ah, boy, man, which part of yard do not come from, man? And so,
Here in Kenya, I think we only know Wagwan and Fire Bandem.
Yeah.
Most
Fire
Kenyans,
band, that's not really the best thing to say.
Right?
Yeah, not so good, not so good.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's what most of us say here, and people think that by saying that you know patois, but clearly it's nothing compared to what you're saying.
A little touch. You know, I learned patois touring with a group called the Itals back in the 90s. And we would go through these parts of the United States where we would maybe order breakfast in Texas. And the, you know, waitress may ask everyone what they want. And then when finished, would of course turn to me and say, what did he say? And what did he say? And so I became sort of an interpreter for the group at times. And they decided to then teach me even more about the language. So they were teaching me as we're driving in the bus, and no, Chris, man, you can't say it like that, you know. And they teach me, no, this is the right way to say it. So I had some good.
Wow. So how long did it take you to learn patois?
I learned a good degree of patois in several years, 5 to 7 years.
Okay. Okay.
I don't use it very much in the music still. I really don't want to misidentify who I am by using the language in the music. I think it's also a matter of respect to artists from Jamaica that, you know, this this is something I was taught, and so I throw a little touch in here and there once
Okay.
in a while.
Awesome, awesome. So you've worked with Kenyatta Hill, and we've also done a song with Don Carlos. How was that? What
Yeah.
brought that about, and who approached the other person? Did you approach Don Carlos? Did he approach you? Did you approach Kenyatta Hill? Did he approach you?
Well, two different set of circumstances. Don Carlos I met back in the 90s through a brother by the name of Gold, who used to be his backup singer. They had done some albums together as Don Carlos and Gold. And I met Gold in Washington and had played him a song that I had created by myself using a 4-track recorder. And he loved this song so much that he made me play it for him about 40 times in a row.
Wow.
And within the week, he had called Don Carlos, and shortly afterward, I was in the studio recording as a guitarist on some songs for Don Carlos, and then in time that led me to play guitar in his band and to
Nice.
do some singing backup as well back in the 1990s. And so during that period, I had recorded that song and I had played it for him. So he agreed to record something with me. Then 20 years later, I decided to re-release it, and he allowed me to also sing on the song with him.
Wow.
Kenyatta Hill was a very different story. I met Kenyatta through people here in Washington. We became friends very quickly and decided to do an album together where we lived together for the course of several months making his album, Rhythm of Life. And it was really quite an experience.
Awesome. Nice. And you have a couple of albums that you've released. Yeah? So,
Oh, yeah.
and also, you're a producer, come artist, come you're the CEO of Honest Music. How is that? How are you able to juggle all that up and still be an artist at the same time?
It's not always very easy. I think that in terms of moving forward, I've been a lot more focused recently on my own music and not producing as much for other artists. But, you know, it just is a matter of creating a schedule and staying with it. So every single night, come 9, 10 o'clock, I'm in the studio and I'm working. And I work every single night.
Speaking of every night in the studio and working every night, tell us about your EP, Matchbox.
Oh, yeah. I'm really, you know, Matchbox. Here you go.
Yeah.
This was
Nice.
something. Give thanks. You know, real matches in them as well. So,
Yeah.
I had the idea for Matchbox as I wanted to do an album last year by myself, creating everything with a drum machine and playing all the instruments myself initially, as this was how I began 25 years ago. And it really turned out very well. But the concept for the Matchbox came where I didn't like at the beginning of the song with a drum machine, you can hear the click, click,
Yeah.
click, click, and the song starts. There was no drum roll like you hear in most reggae music. You hear diddle, 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 and the song starts. So I decided to put at the beginning of each song a match lighting. And the song begins. And so each song then ends with a match going out into a glass of water. And so that was the concept. And so I did bring a drummer in to replace the drums, my good brethren, Leslie James. And I did have some people replace a couple of the parts, but I kept a lot of the parts myself that I had played, just being that it was a very personal project for me.
I think that's a really amazing set, Christos. That is really dope and very creative of you.
I give thanks. Give thanks.
You're most welcome. So speaking of you producing your own songs and right now just focusing on your own music, are you planning to visit Kenya anytime soon? Because we'd love to have you here.
I would love to visit Kenya. You know, if
Uh-huh.
I can get an offer to come and to perform, I will be there with open arms,
Uh-huh.
ready. So, you know, if there's any opportunities waiting, I
Uh-huh.
have actually have spoken with this about this with my good brethren Kenyatta as well in the past.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about doing some things maybe together. So we'll see what the future holds. You
Okay.
can find us on social media, and if there's any offers out there,
Uh-huh.
we're ready and waiting.
So any other artists that you're interested in working with here in Kenya? Do you have someone you'd love to work with?
In Kenya, I would
Yes.
love to hear and to meet more of the artists from Kenya. I don't listen to as much modern music as I should, as when I'm recording, I try to isolate myself and not be influenced
Uh-huh.
by a lot of outside music.
Okay.
But I love what's happening in Afrobeat today. I think that the movement of Afrobeat music is really taking off all over the world. And, you know, who knows? It may be an artist I've never heard of, but
Okay.
I'm very, very open and would love to exchange some ideas if there's any artists out there.
Awesome, awesome. So as we wrap up, because time is not on our side, Christos, what is your advice to the young artists, reggae artists who are coming up in the world? And if what would you tell them to do, or what would you advise them to do, and especially when it comes to producing and maybe recording music?
Well, first, don't compare yourselves to other people. That is one of the worst things you can ever do. Each of us has a special gift that makes us unique. When you try to be someone else, you try to imitate someone else, you're not honoring your own identity. So be true to who you are. Don't take discouragement from people personally. If someone says something that makes you feel, you know, in any way difficult or make you feel as if you're struggling, keep going. Believe in yourself.
Mhm.
Picture in your mind what it is you want and what you want to do and where you want to be, and just stay with it every single day, because it's a lot of work that has to go in. You
Awesome.
can't do it without the homework.
Awesome, awesome. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Christos. But before you leave, before you leave, Christos, tell me, this is just for fun or just for laughs, maybe. If you are locked out somewhere and you just had maybe your laptop and your iPod somewhere,
Mhm.
which two albums from the artists that you really love would you be left with, or would you love listening to if you are locked up somewhere?
Oh, that's so difficult to say, but I will say Ake Becca, Midnight. If you haven't heard an album called Beauty for Ashes,
Uh-huh.
that album was very, very powerful influence on me
Okay.
about 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Um, I would also say an artist by the name of Clinton Fearon does
Oh.
not stop inspiring me. He is just one of the greatest artists in reggae music. And every time I listen to him, I just feel inspired and just and also he gives such a good example
Yeah.
of you know that age does not matter that much. Here's
Mhm.
a guy who just gets better and better and better as he gets older, and it's such an inspiration.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Christos. Thank you for gracing
That's
our
it.
show. Hoping to see you here live in studio soon.
I I hope so.
Thank you so much. That has been amazing. Wenye mko nyumbani, wenye mnatucheki mtu wangu, nimeongea kizungu mpaka Kiswahili imekataa mtu wangu. Sijui kama I feel. But anywho, when he singer, producer, musician and CEO of Honest Music, anajiita Christos DC all the way from Washington DC, but anakuanga maeneo mtu wangu, amekuwa na sisi, tumekuwa kwa show mtu wangu. It's been real. Thank you so much, Christos. Tutapatana tena ama we'll see each other soon, hopefully. Wagwan.
Oh,
So watu wangu manzetu
yes,
wenye mko kijani, Hapo sawa, nikaa bado hatuko tumeachana sana, lakini sasa wako chonjo. wenye wako nyumbani, mtu wangu, pump up, tunaendelea tu mteti. DJ Kamuzi yako pale on the ones and twos, tunaingia pale tusababishe vilivyo, alafu pale hivyo kitu 11:30 tutakuwa tunaingia pale na top 10 countdown na MC Jaochi leo yuko na DJ Kamuzi, so keep it tuned. Wewe hata wanataka kutuongelesha, hit us up at Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at NTV Jamdown #Jamdown KE. Kamuzi, tuende kazi mtu wangu Jo.